Hi, as the video name suggests, there are certain topics we should talk about. You can use the sections functionality to just jump to that particular section of the video. Otherwise, we're going to start by discussing the gains Ukraine did over the past weeks if you haven't been following on the community tab, and I suggest you do, because there we're discussing news right as they come along. And we're going to be talking about why it is not so nice to be Russian right now in area around Liman. Let's talk about this. So let's start by looking at the battlefield situation and a map of Ukraine right here. Or someone might tell you that it's not a map of Ukraine anymore, it's a map of Russia. But let's leave that discussion for the second part. So around Kupiansk, Ukraine has started moving downwards slowly. Petropavlovka here is not colored as Ukrainian, but it should be. There has been reports that Petropavlovka has been shelled by the Russians, which only suggests that there is no Russians in there. So by this point, we can say that this whole area right now is now being controlled by the Ukrainians, and it's not that complex to realize what's going to happen next. Ukraine is just going to move alongside the highway to try to get to Svatove, and we're going to talk about this just in a little bit. But first, let's cover the situation around Liman. Over the week, Ukraine has been capturing a lot of the territory around the north of Liman, but then around the middle of the week, Ukraine was able to establish control over the Serebryanka part of the river, cross it, and then take control of the forest area here. And then from there, Ukraine has started launching an attacks towards Torske and Zarishne region, which is around here, which effectively cut down the ability to resupply the Liman group from Kremina. Over the period of the same period, Ukraine has also advanced from Ritkodub to Nove, to Zelena Dolina, to Kolodezi, and now today, obviously, to Stavki, and more importantly, it's now trying to attack Zarishne. So with this said, the situation that we were experiencing was that Ukraine attacked this part of the Zarishne-Torske grouping from the eastern area, and then also it moved from the north to attack it from the western side. And this created a very narrow pocket for the Russian troops, and they were significantly cut off from any kind of supplies, and the situation became completely critical with them realizing that they are either running right now or they are completely encircled. And they were waiting just a little bit too long, and one might say that by this point there is no easy way out for them. While technically the battles are still inside of Zarishne-Torske, and the Russians can still fight and get out from Liman because they did consolidate forces from Drobyshevo and from Yampil, and also obviously from Stavki, to then prepare and move to Zarishne and then move out. You can just look at this picture and understand why was that a problem. Because they decided to move out already at that moment when the forces of Ukraine was already attacking towards Zarishne. And staying on that open field, basically as a column of trucks, was not a very easy thing to do. And again, they will be leaving a lot of the heavier equipment right there. So that's the happy situation. So we can happily say that a lot of the orcs are not going to make it out. Liman grouping is now falling, and we know that what that means, that now the highway to attack towards the Kremina and Svatove line is open, and now it's just a mopping up operation for the Ukrainians, which is great. The downside of it is something that I must tell you, is that the regular troops of the Russian army have exited the pocket quite a long time ago by now, so they started moving out maybe at the start of the week. I got some news about that. And what was left in Liman was essentially like a battle reserve battalions. It was forces that came in as the fake mobilization, which I talk about in my recent video about why the Russian army is shit. And basically, right now, these forces are trying to exit. This is, of course, means that some of the more juicier targets that Ukraine was hoping to capture or destroy are not captured and destroyed. But all in all, it is still a major victory for Ukraine, because it doesn't matter that they exit. What matters is that Now Ukraine will be able to clean up all of this territory and move to Svatove and Kremina line. And let's actually talk about the Svatove Kremina line. Now, the taking of Liman obviously wasn't an easy task for Ukrainians. I mean, it's a war, nothing is easy. And they bought enough time to start making some kind of defense. If you remember, the problem was that the Russian forces retreated from Izium to even beyond Svatove because they were afraid that Ukraine would just cross and continue. But then they forced back and they were able to somewhat stop Ukrainians on the around the Oskil River. And then when the slower operation began to trying to break the Liman gateway. So they were able to prepare a little bit. So right now there has been about 2 weeks of preparations with some of the dugouts and some of the battle positions. So it's not going to be an easy task, but it's a very, very long line like this Svatove. So there is plenty of spaces where Ukraine can try to find some kind of weak spots. And the main Russian problem in this area is obviously the lack of manpower, while the area around Liman, if you can see all of the green zones, the forests, the rivers here, and so on, there was a lot of natural obstacles in this area. That is not the situation along this long Svatove Kremina line. So it's going to hold Ukrainians for some time, but most analysts agree that it's not going to be for too long. And at some point, Ukraine is going to be looking to liberate this whole area here. There is a question that people are posing whether Ukraine will go forward to Starobilsk, because some of them are actually saying that maybe it's not going to be a very nice position for Ukraine to be if it goes to the right away to the country borders, because it's going to be attacked from both sides and it's not a favorable position. So they just might kind of reinforce the Starobilsk line once they get past Svatove to Starobilsk, and then from there attack towards Luhansk, because in Luhansk right now there is no defensive positions beyond the line that was manned for 8 years, and that line we talked about in some video ago. But there is this thick red line, which is the defensive line that was used for 8 years, and I'm pretty sure it's been reinforced or will be reinforced once Ukrainians get to Svatove, because the continuation of this campaign is pretty obvious for anyone. Ukraine is having momentum. There is nothing stopping it. Again, there is major Ukrainian force that's just holding up and in a staring contest between the Russian force here. So none of them can move. The Ukrainian operation around Kherson continues. Russians are trying to supply anything to that area. But as major analysts estimate, right now Russia is getting maybe about 1/4 of what they actually need. So there is obviously supplies that going in, but this is just going to be the attrition. So one quarter every day until the supplies are spent, and then Ukraine can concentrate forces and do some kind of major push. So that's the situation. I'm pretty sure there was more people that covered this, and I recommend you looking at their channels. But we should definitely be aware that the Liman operation is now concluding. Ukraine is mopping up. Good stuff. And let's go to the second part of the video. And I want to start the second part by thanking obviously these wonderful people here. But I want you to know that this is not only them, while they are definitely supporting and helping contribute and support the Ukrainian army that I'm doing through this channel. What's more important is that you watch this and like this, and more importantly, participate in our channel community, because the community tab for this channel has been amazing. I love you all. Let's go on. There's way too many topics for me to cover in this one video, so join us for this Sunday where we're going to have a lot more time to discuss all of them in detail. So if I miss anything, go there. So Putin, by the fact that he couldn't win over Ukraine, he just decided to declare that whatever he was able to capture is a victory in itself. The problem obviously stares him down in the eyes, which is that Ukrainians are not going to be stopping at this point. And his only threat is that I'm going to pull a nuclear threat on you, and therefore you shall not attack the now Russian territory because he said so. And I think the best response to that came from the NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, that was shortly after the speech that Putin made, which was that the cost of inaction and acceptance of such a scenario for the Western countries, for us, is actually exceeding the costs that would be incurring if we would, for example, arm Ukraine. This is a major statement from NATO Secretary General. Why? Because he is a talking head. He is not the one deciding the politics and policies of NATO. He is just a representative figure of more or less consensus of the bloc. That's why I think it was very important to stress out. If we had any kind of fears about the fact that NATO allies would not support, maybe not all, we know Hungary has its own reservations around it because they maybe want to get some pieces of some other territories. At least I'm pretty sure that was a thing that Orban thought about once or twice. But we know that now NATO is going to be supporting Ukraine up until the end, just because it was stated that the cost would be greater. And this is good. Now, obviously, that means that Ukrainian territories are staying Ukrainian, whatever Putin says. And I'm really looking forward to NATO allies now escalating their support for Ukraine. Mainly, I'm expecting US to lift the restrictions that they had, that Ukraine cannot assault Russian territory with missiles from HIMARS or MLRS 270. That was a stupid restriction, and I'm not sure why it was applied to Ukraine. Russia is obviously not restricting themselves to anything, as we see for a lot of civilian deaths in the past couple of days. I was very happy to hear President Biden talk about the fact that US will help Ukraine regain territories. I think that was encouraging, and I'm really looking forward US standing by that word with continuing supply of weapons. We have seen some Abrams tanks moving, hopefully, towards Ukraine. I know that people are critiquing them for being quite problematic in maintenance and supply, but I'm pretty sure if we set up the logistics chains properly enough, they can be a big asset for Ukraine. And additionally, talking about equipment that can help Ukraine is obviously the new GMLRS rockets. Well, not new, but I mean different one than Ukraine used to before. The new GMLRS rockets, which are M30A1, is anti-personnel rockets. They are supposed to be something that substituted cluster bombs for US. They essentially explode in the air and they fire about 180,000 of tungsten balls that are going through basically light armor vehicles and personnel like butter, which obviously would make short work of any kind of Russian mobilized troops as we know it. That is a big game-changing weapon for Ukraine, especially now that we're hearing that Russia wants to amass 120,000 people force to attack from the north towards Kyiv again. We talked about that it's a completely useless attempt. There is too much defense right now around Kyiv, whatever number of people they send, unless it's 3 million. And with new weapons, with new missiles, that's just going to be even more devastating defeat, especially because I'm pretty sure Ukraine is going to start hitting the Russians even while they are advancing on the Belarusian territory. And finally, let's talk about the nuclear. For a longer time, my position that there will not be a nuclear exchange. However, it seems that Putin is determined to put himself in a position where he will be forced almost to do that, right? So he is basically declaring this Russian territory, like the Ukrainian territory, as part of the Russian territory to do two things. Firstly, so he can use all the forces, wherever it be his internal forces, police, or conscripts, because they will be technically fighting on the Russian soil rather than fighting on the Ukrainian soil. At least that's how he's painting the picture. And secondly, obviously, that he threatened the whole world with nuclear annihilation if Ukraine will continue advancing and taking back these lands. And I think that there is a chance of that. Most of the analysts that I listen to now consider that there is definitely a chance for it. So I'm really interested to see what the NATO allies will do. I would consider everyone to be aware of your nearest fallout shelter, just in case. And I don't want to have any kind of panic. I don't expect this to escalate severely. However, there is a lot of analysts saying that some kind of limited nuclear conflict is impossible. At this point, there is a lot of investment both from the Western allies as they see threat to this whole basically civilizational effort for the democracies that Putin is waging on Ukraine. So in sense, we're already in this. If there's going to be a nuclear attack on Ukraine, I'm expecting some kind of non-nuclear retaliation by the West. Sanctions would be the weakest option. More importantly, I would see certain parts of the Russian military destroyed completely. Potentially even the strategic nuclear forces as an option. But I'm not sure. In any case, that would be a terrible outcome. There will be catastrophic consequences and there will be a lot of unknowns. We should be prepared for all scenarios, and at this point we should be aware that a nuclear option is potentially possible. So all the people in Ukraine have been living with the fear of being wiped out every day. This fear is now slowly encroaching on each of our lives. And I hope you use that fear to recognize how is it to live with that fear. But this is what makes us humans the ability to overcome this fear and see what's right. And in this sense, there is no right option to give in. We need to be strong, we need to be supportive, but most importantly, we need to be prepared. Find out the information, come to my stream, and we're going to talk about this more. Slava Ukraini!